Hello, this is Brendan, and welcome to the 90th episode of my show here. And what I'm going to do in this episode is just to review this final draft of the Chiron and Achilles illustration, and then we'll have a look at the next one, the preview sketch of the next one I'm working on, which I believe is pronounced Ladon. And Ladon is a dragon-like character, so I'll have a look at him in a minute. Right now, first, let's have a look at this illustration here. And you can see the detail is not very high, and I still left a little bit of the cartoony outline kind of feeling right there. But this is not going to be printed. And let's say the largest size, if you're like viewing on YouTube right now, even if you want full screen on a big monitor, I'm on a pretty big monitor right here. Right now it's at 1980 by 1000 or 980 pixels width by 1200 or 1020, I believe is actually what it is. And so just like that, it's good. And there's so much detail going on. And I'm not making a poster out of this, or if I did, then I could just go back and fill in more detail. But there's a lot, like even hair on his arms and stuff like that. And if you go back here and zoom in, you can see a lot of detail about the snake, and that is Achilles. One thing that was noted already, I haven't submitted this to a group yet, but what I already started getting comments because somebody, I submitted it to a couple of DeviantArt groups, but not a comment group. And one of them was a mythology group, and it was someone who really loved Achilles, and they said that his hair should be yellow, and I didn't know that, and so I looked it up, and I was like, oh, it's very important actually. His name, I think, even had a meaning of it. There was something about his name was he of yellow hair or something like that. So, well, he's in the background in the dark. I guess his hair looks kind of brownish, but that's something I'll definitely update, because if nothing else, the story should be told accurately through the illustration, at least with the type of illustration that, storytelling illustration that I'm doing here. So some of the details with this that I don't think I covered previously were, here was a reference I used. I did pull out a lot of reference. I didn't need the horse so much, as you can see. I just looked at these. I've been drawing a lot of nature scenes recently, and it's really interesting to take the time to think about all of the various things that you should have in a natural terrain, not a man-made terrain. We have a tendency to live in suburbs and cities and just think about grass and trees here and there. But in a more natural terrain, it should be a lot more random. You have some high grass here, low grass there, different color variations. You can see I did a lot of that. There are some flowers in there. There could be mushrooms. There's usually random rocks here and there. And so it gets tiring actually to even think of all that stuff. But you look it up. You just go online, and that's why these types of reference photos are really handy. And then for Chiron, he became Sagittarius constellation, so I had that reference there. And the lyre, I don't know how to pronounce it, that's the instrument. And that was about it. I had some night sky and a fire reference here too that helped out a little bit. Fire still didn't come out so great, but that's about as good as I can get it for now. I like how the lighting came out on Achilles in the background. You can really feel how the the light from the fire is going up and hitting him in all upward directions. And right around here, you can feel that there's the light of the fire is being blocked, so it's a little darker down there. And you also have a little bit of a cast shadow behind him, and that's activated as well on the snake. And then with the trees, now the trees, the trick, I've shown this many times, obviously I got a lot of detail in here, but it started off just by doing this trick that I keep showing over and over. I'm on a blank layer now, so let's pretend this was well, instead of making, I don't want you to use your imagination too much. So let me just get a bright, very obvious green color and kind of make a grassy, a fake grassy kind of look right here, like this, and you can randomize it as much as you want. And while you're on a blank layer, you just cut that, then remove your selection, and that becomes a new brush, because if you cut or copy something, it automatically becomes a brush. And so now if I increase my brush size, I can actually just tap all over, and it'll make that pattern that I just copied over and over. So if we zoom in here, let me get rid of that real quick. You zoom in, you can see I did a lot of that right there. So from a distance, it looks like there's a lot of detail and texture. You zoom in, you can kind of see how it's not so natural. It has like a pattern, a bit of a pattern to it. But after you do that, you go back and you add some natural, just random strokes to it and the flowers, and by the time it's all said and done, I think it does the trick. Now, of course, the main focus when people look at this is not going to be to stare at the grass or the trees or anything, I hope. So with the characters drawn in well, and I think they have enough going on about them to draw the eye's attention, that very subtle detail on the grass and the trees, I hope I'll be forgiven for a lack of detail with that. So there's a little bit of blue glow behind him around his shoulders, and that was to give the feeling of moonlight. And the moon, which, it almost looks like a photo, to be honest, if you zoom out. But if you zoom in here, I did use photo reference, and I just kind of, used a brush and drew what I saw. And when you come back from a distance, it almost looks like you cut it out from, it looks like I cut it out from the photo. And I hit some highlights on the bottom of the leaves here. Added a little of that orange, yellowish color, which I hope represents the light reflecting off from the fire. And there should be an overall feeling that the area around the fire is more light, and it tapers off into the darkness in any direction you go. But the whole background scene, it's not pitch black because it's a full moon. So I left a little bit of just overall brightness. So you get that kind of like evening glow, right? A little bit magical. Now, something I wanted to do is I forgot, I didn't bring it up, and I'm having problems with photo editing software anyway, but I want to bring up, you can do this yourself, just go into like Wikipedia and look up some Renaissance paintings, and you'll notice that they often have sort of like, let's imagine, let me get back to a normal brush here. Let's imagine that there's like a spotlight here, and it's kind of like shining, and make the brush a little bit smaller, kind of like shining on a person. It's almost as if they're standing next to a window, and because, in ancient times they didn't have electricity. And so a lot of the paintings that they would make, there would be some random background that didn't fit often, and very often. That's why ancient paintings stand out a lot sometimes. But the characters would look like, they're just some kind of light just quite close to them, but not a very strong light. So it'd be like the light coming through a window. And why is that? Well, the artist would have to have some light on the models, the actual models that they're using, which were real people back then. And then the models, I guess they would have to stand near candles or, near a window to get the correct lighting. And then the background would just be painted in. You would go outside or just fill in something. So the characters were much more important than the background in both paintings. And what that does is, aside from, making, I guess, the job easier so they don't have to stand outside as much, but it also creates a mood. And it also made me realize that those paintings are very beautiful paintings, a lot of them, like Michelangelo's work and Raphael. And I'm not as familiar with Raphael, but a lot of French artists who I really like. And that effect, it kind of makes me, it's a learning lesson. It's to say, who cares about where the lighting is really coming from? Because if we're to be that accurate, really all the light should be coming from the moon and mostly the sky. So you have this like overall, radiation of light coming from the entire sky coming downward, and there'd be a bit of a spotlight effect coming from the moon towards the foreground. But you can also just say, worry about that a little bit, do focus on that, and then just forget about it and make it look good. So put your own imaginary spotlights wherever you want them, and just make things glow as you see fit, so that you can bring out, the feeling of whatever you want. And it's not really fake. You're not faking or being unrealistic if you do that, because in reality, you can have light bouncing all over the place for any random reason. So it's all about just, they do this in like movies in Hollywood. It's called lighting. And so, stage lighting and all kinds of lighting. It's just, it's a trick that you can use. You don't always have to be so realistic and think, where should the light be coming from? And, there's no electricity here, so there couldn't possibly be a lamp shining on him from over here. Oh, who cares? Just try and do something that you think makes it look appropriate, and then brings out the characteristics that you want the people to look on and or look at. Okay, and so that's basically what I did with most of this, and that was it. There's a final draft. I might come back later, and I have to fix his hair color, some other stuff. If you zoom in, you see the water is a little wishy-washy, but again, I don't feel as though I need to spend so much time on that, because it's not the main attraction. It's just there to fill a certain purpose, and I did spend time on it. It's just, not perfect. I could have put more texture on the rock. I might do that in the next revision as well. So now introducing this is the new one, and this would be the fourth, part 4 of 10 in my Greek mythology series here. And this one is based on this dragon character, and the dragon, his name is Ladon. I don't know if I'm going to have, write it on here. Let me get a stronger color, perhaps, like this red. Ladon. And apparently it's pronounced Ladon, like L-A-I. It's all, or Ladon, I'm not sure. It's all Greek. So what happened with this is, and of course all of these stories seem to involve Hercules or Achilles or something, but they're just the most interesting things to draw, so that's why I choose them. This tree has golden apples, and if you eat one of these golden apples, you'll be given like immortal life. It'll make you an immortal. So obviously it's something you want. But there's this dragon and these nymphs which protect the tree. Excuse me. And so the nymphs, for this particular garden, they are something like the women of the night, or the nymphs of the night. So I felt like it had to be a night scene. And I guess it's going to be similar to this one, where there'll be a lot of glow, right? When I have like this, just have it kind of glowing. Because how else will we be able to make out the shininess from the gold of the golden apples? I want those to stand out. And then there's the dragon. So the dragon, as the myth goes, he is wrapped around the tree and he's protecting it. And Hercules, one of his jobs, because Hercules had all these labors to do, was to steal an apple. And there's two versions of the story, or whether or not he stole it. He just had to obtain one of these apples. It was a job he had to do. And so one story says that he stole the apple, somehow he did a trick, outsmarted the dragon or something like this. And the other says that he slayed the dragon and then obviously just took an apple. And these nymphs are also there too. I don't know why they don't seem to come out in the story so much. They're also there to protect the garden, and they didn't seem to have anything to do with Hercules, so I guess they can't fight Hercules. But yeah, so and what is a nymph? So a nymph, generally speaking, are these harmless, somewhat seductive types of girls, and so I guess they would use their seductive powers to distract people, and that would be what they would do. But Hercules, of course, well, he's a hero. So, and the way I started this one, let me see if I go all the way back. If you took my creative perspective illustration course, you would have seen, you'll recognize this immediately. What I did is I created these perspective guidelines so that we could make it like we're looking upwards and things are getting further away from us as into the distance. And so with those guidelines, it helped me out a lot to make that feeling of everything kind of like, looking upwards, going away. And then I did the sketch, and I separated the background, and I have, well, I'll do it in this order, and I made the sky with gradient colors like that, and that might even change. There's many ways that you can do an evening sky, especially if you want to get that magical glow effect. And again, you don't have to be too realistic. You can have fun with it. And then I just threw these stars in there. And all of this is going to change dramatically. I'm trying to lay down the base colors just to get some kind of, some kind of feeling of which colors are going to work better together. A little bit of a color palette. And it's not so pivotally important that the colors are exactly, the dragon could be red or blue or whatever. It doesn't matter. What's more important is going to be a lot of the detail, the values, and things like that, and the shape. And so I'm working on that. But the colors, they do seem to make a bit of a difference. I noticed if I go like this, for example, and just turn off that foreground color, if you can still see the sketch, there's something very cool about it. Excuse me. And I think it might be because of the gradient effect that's happening there. And it also has something to do with the fact that these colors, especially the green, are not super attractive. What I noticed recently is when I was studying someone else's work to make some environments, is that picking an actual green, just like a right in the middle of the green area, and trying to make a tree or grass with that, it doesn't always give the most attractive results. What happens a lot is you can choose above the green up in this area and below the green closer to the yellow, and that mixture of using the more bluer greens and the more yellow greens will give you ultimately give you an effect that's a little bit more attractive, more pleasing to the eye. And so I'm going to work on that a little bit. So for right now, that's really all I have. I might do a bit of a time lapse. I'm not even sure right now. If you can't tell, I'm kind of in the middle of a cold. I'm fighting it right now. And yeah, but Merry Christmas anyway. I hope everyone's having a good, happy Christmas, and New Year is coming up very soon. And next year, I hope we're all going to be staying creative and making a lot more illustrations. A lot of work to do. I'm looking forward to that very much. And that's about it for today. Yeah, I will go ahead and throw in a bit of a time lapse. I'll just throw in towards the end of this. I'm going to finish sketching this. There's a lot of details that need to be added, so at least you can see what it's supposed to look like. Right now, it's very, very rough. And that's it. I'll tell you more about the story behind all this in the next one when it's finished. And go to DeviantArt. Go to my website, bschu.net. It stands, it's an abbreviation for my name, Brendan Schumacher. bschu.net. You can see my older newsletters and sign up for my newsletter. And in addition to that, if you like this, remember to subscribe and share with like-minded people. And we'll see you soon again in the next episode, which will be number 91. We're almost getting to 100. I'm excited about that. And so that's it. That's it for now. Here's a time lapse, and see you later. Have a good day. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, and all of the holidays and the New Year's that are coming up. Have a good one. See you later. Bye bye.